Hello there, welcome to my channel. My name is Bryan Lomax, for those who may be here for the first time. 31 on the 31st. Yes, it's becoming an annual tradition. Started off just in October, but it has branched out. Yeah, we're doing one. I'm right here, right now, to do just that. 31 on the 31st, Fantasy Edition. Obviously, we've got the usual crew back. We've got Cody Leach, we've got Chandler. We should have had CP, but due to various health issues, he's decided to take a step back. Hopefully, we'll get him joining us for the after show kind of thing that we usually do. When that will be, who knows? But yeah, hopefully he'll get to give his 31 during that. We'll see what happens. But yeah, this is the Fantasy Edition, as I said. We've got Star Wars, we've got Fantastic Beasts and Harry Potter, we got Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, and rounding it out, we've got Chronicles of Narnia. This is a 31 on the 31st, which is a bit more in my wheelhouse, I would say. We're not all the way there yet. Maybe some surprises coming in the next few months, next couple of months. I don't know. At the time of filming this, we've not announced anything, so I will leave it at that. But yeah, there may be one that is... There may be something coming up. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, this is the fantasy one. They're the franchises. You should know the score by now if you've seen these before. If not, we rank 31 movies on the 31st of the month. Start with the worst, work our way to the best, in my opinion. First up, bottom of the barrel, absolute worst of the bunch is Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. This film is... I used to have fun with this just on a purely action-orientated level. You know, when this first came out, I was 21, still a young man, still liked a nice bit of action. And there is plenty of that. But it's one of those films that, even though I thought it was fairly bad back then, I still thought it was kind of an improvement on Phantom Menace. But that was mostly down to the fact that, yeah, okay, I'm just entertained by the action. But it's just gotten worse and worse as time goes by. The dialogue is even more cringeworthy today. The performance from Hayden Christensen. I used to defend Hayden Christensen. I felt sorry for the guy because the amount of attack he came under. But I do look at this performance here and I'm just... yeah, it is kind of creepy. Like some of the looks he gives, I'm like, I don't see Padme falling for this guy. The action sequences as well, a lot of them, they literally are there for the sake of being there. There's so much in this film where you could take it out and it would make zero impact. Just slightly above that, at number 30, is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. There is a good film in here somewhere. Unfortunately, I feel like George Lucas forgot his audience. He fills most of the running time with Jar Jar Binks, which, let's face it, we can all agree is probably one of the most annoying characters ever put to film. He just destroys any scene that he's in. Now the thing is, if you take out everything with Jar Jar Binks in, which I believe someone has done. There was a fan edit like floating around in the early noughties in which somebody had done that, and it's actually a pretty damn good film. Everything else that is left is stuff that I feel like most little ones wouldn't understand. Certainly like the kids who got into Star Wars way back when. I feel like if they went back to that age now and watched Phantom Menace, trade routes, all that nonsense, it's just like... I don't even get what's going on half the time, and I'm a fully grown man. I'm just like, why is this in a film that is primarily directed at kids? The stuff that is good is needlessly complex for kids to get on board with, and then the stuff that is there for the kids is just super annoying for adults. But yeah, like I say, you take out Jar Jar Binks, admittedly you're taking out half the film, but if you take him out, you do actually have a pretty decent Star Wars film. Every film from here on out, I would say I like, to varying degrees. Some of them are ones I'm probably not going to be rushing to watch again anytime soon, but I can appreciate them on various levels. So at number 29, we've got The Chronicles of Narnia, Voyage of the Dawn Treader. It's an adventure movie, and I can go along with it, and I can be reasonably entertained, but it doesn't do anything like trend-setting. It doesn't do anything that kind of raises the bar. It's just, okay, that killed an hour and a half, 2 hours of my life, and I wasn't offended by it. Paint by numbers, I would say. Paint by numbers filmmaking as far as fantasy goes. The biggest problem with it, I think, is that there is no really clearly defined character arcs. You know, if you look at the first two, there was a bit more clearly defined character arcs about these young kids kind of learning to become adults across the course of this movie. Well, they've already done that across 2 movies. So here it's like, well, we can't do that again. So what do we have? Oh, we have Lucy worrying about not looking pretty like her older sister. And we've got Edmund still struggling to be a man in a child's body. It's just, yeah, could have done with a very clear kind of, this is how they are at the beginning, this is the journey they go on, which changes them and makes them this. I'm not saying that it's not there, it's not very clearly defined, which just makes it a bit bland. At number 28, and I thought this one would be a bit higher, to be honest. I really did. I've watched all of these movies for this 31. It's the first time I've ever done that, I think. Gone back and literally watched every single one of them again. But I did for this one, and I thought this one would be higher. I watched the extended cut, and it is, of course, Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It feels like maybe it's a bit too faithful to the book. What works as a children's story in book form, I feel like you kind of need to maybe flesh out a bit for the sake of a movie, or to make things a bit more dramatic. But kind of taking it directly off the page doesn't necessarily always work. I'm sure there's a lot of fans out there who love it that way. They literally want to see the book on film. And with me, I'm just not of that persuasion. I think a book's a book, a film's a film. I think sometimes things aren't quite as dramatic on film as they are when they're in the book, when you can hear inside the people's headspace. Seeing these 4 kids, be immersed into this world of Narnia and spend, half a day? What looks like half a day going through weapons training, and then all of a sudden they're free to go into battle and fight highly experienced, rogues gallery of mythical creatures that, like I say, have been there for, in some cases, hundreds of years and have exponentially more experience in weapons training. So yeah, it feels a bit silly. Number 27, and this is where I'm going to take some serious flack, but remember guys, it's just an opinion, is Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope. I've never been that big on this movie. For some people it's a religion and they just will not see the flaws, or even if they do see the flaws, they don't care. It's still a 5-star masterpiece. And it's just, for me, the first 20-25 minutes kind of bores me, always has. Seen 2 droids bumbling about the desert and getting into hijinks. A lot of the creatures stuff in it, with these wacky sand people and the traders, and I'm just like, can we move along please? Can we get to the actual story, which is a good story? I'll say this much: the problem with Star Wars Episode 4 is George Lucas. I think he's a world builder. I think that's where his strength lies. I think he's got a lot of creativity in that regard. I think he's taken a classic story template of a hero's journey and put it within this space opera kind of world, and that's great. That's where his genius lies, that's where his creativity lies. But from that point on, I think that the actual directing of it, the handling of the script should have been passed on to more more capable hands. He knows what he wants visually, and once he's got that in the can, boom, let's move on to the next scene. But he doesn't quite understand emotion. Seeing your homeworld be wiped out and barely registering it and barely going back, well, not going back to it at all. As a kid, watching this film, I had no understanding at all that Leia's homeworld had been destroyed. It just didn't register with me because there's no emotion there. And then the next time we see her, she's cracking jokes at Luke. That's how I feel throughout most of this film. There's great ideas on show, but the execution is pretty piss poor. Like I say, not from a visual standpoint per se, although I do think the directors that came after definitely had more of a visual kind of style to them than Lucas does. I just think Lucas is very workmanlike. His creativity is all in his head with regards to the ideas, the world he creates, but then he needs to give it to someone else. Stupid lines of dialogue in it now as well, after the fact, when you go back. Like there's one point when Obi-Wan, they come across this raid. There's been a raid, and Obi-Wan points out that it couldn't have been stormtroopers because their aim is so spot on. And then you spend the rest of this franchise just watching a plethora of stormtroopers missing their target every single time. If you strike me down, Darth, I shall become more powerful than you could possibly imagine. How? In what ways have you become more powerful than you can possibly imagine? You just pop up every now and again as a ghost and whisper things into Luke's ears. It's like, really? You don't look all that powerful to me. Number 26 is Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald. I really liked this film the first time I saw it. I didn't really get the criticism, to be honest. I followed it perfectly fine. And yet, for some reason, this time around, so this was my second time watch. I watched it for this 31 and 31. There were things in it where I was just like, hang on, what, how did they get there? What happened there? There does feel like there's a few missing links in it. Yeah, I don't know what went on there, to be honest. And I feel like the film might be a bit longer than it needs to be as well, which sounds a bit weird saying there's missing links, but then that the film is longer. I think that mostly comes down to there are certain scenes in there, action sequences that feel really prolonged, where actually you could have dialed down those and maybe upped a bit more of the explanation side of things. I personally still really enjoy the film because I like these characters. I think it's a little bit of a mistake to split them up as much as they do, because obviously in the first film it was about them coming together, going on an adventure together. I really grew to love them over the course of the first Fantastic Beasts film, and then in this one they're almost divided right from the start, and they never truly quite get back together as a cohesive whole. So I feel like I missed that element that we had from the first one. Number 25 is Solo, a Star Wars story. I think the criticisms for this film are a little over the top. I would say I don't think it's not a bad film. It's actually quite a good film. I enjoy it. I think it's a bit plodding at the start. It takes a while to get going, but it's got some decent characters in it. Paul Bettany makes for a really good villain. I can't remember the name of the guy who took over the role of Han Solo, but he nails it. To be honest, I think I see a young Harrison Ford in him. The performance really matches, I feel. I feel like they're the same character. And I thought it was a bad idea, to be honest, when they first announced it. But seeing the casting, seeing how he plays it, I'm like, no, I can get on board with this. I think it's pretty good. I think Ron Howard does a pretty good job directing it. I think there are answers to questions in the film that we never were really asking. So on that side of things, I'm like, yeah, I don't really need to know why Han Solo is called Han Solo. I could just easily and quite happily go along with believing that was just the name he was given at birth. We live in this fantasy world. It's not out of the realm of believability that, no, he's just that's his name, Han Solo. Han Solo. Why did we need? Yeah, bit weird. But it's a tiny moment in in a 2-hour, 20-minute, 2-hour half movie. So it's just things like that, little niggles. They don't really bother me as much as, say, having a story that really falls apart. And I don't think this one does. I think it's got a pretty decent central story that shows us how Han becomes, a slightly jaded figure that we find him at the start of Star Wars Episode 4. So yeah, it's good. And Woody Harrelson is always good bang for your buck, I think. I stick Woody Harrelson in anything, and he's really watchable. Number 24 is The Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian. This has always been my favourite of the three. I like the darker tone. I think one of the things that I didn't like about the first one is the way it's lit. Everything's just really broad daylight. On film, it just doesn't feel quite as cinematic as when you mute those colours down. You're able to get a bit of grit in there. And this one feels a bit more in that vein. There's kind of less fantasy creatures stuff because the villain is a human one and his army is a human one. But I feel like there's a bit more conflict in there. There's a bit more of like physical confrontation going on. It's just more up my street, I guess. It takes everything from the first one, kind of does it a little bit again, but darkens the tone, gets a bit more violence in there, a bit more action. I don't know, I just like it more for that reason. I think having this character of Prince Caspian as well come into it and almost be like a central figure, it's really his story, it's his journey. It means that you can be a bit more kind of specific with regards to the character arc there. Everything doesn't hinge on all four of the kids having their individual character arcs, which obviously, like in the first one, all four of them are kind of like the main characters. And I think Edmund gets a pretty solid character arc, whereas the other three are a bit like, maybe not quite as solid. Whereas here, we don't need them to have that as much because we have this central figure of Prince Caspian. It's, as I say, it's his story of a boy who is kicked out of his own kingdom, essentially, and has to win it back, and has to learn how to become a king that is better than the one that came before. So, yeah, it's a solid enough fantasy fairy tale adventure. And number 23 is Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Easily the best of the prequels, I should say. One of the best lightsaber battles, probably the best lightsaber battle in the entire Star Wars franchise between Obi-Wan and Anakin at the end. A great setting for that, some great orchestral music to that by John Williams. Everything was leading to that moment. I think it's very clear. I remember once, it was in Empire or Total Film, there was an interview with George Lucas, and I remember him after the... it might have been just when Revenge of the Sith was coming out, and he basically openly admitted that the story he wanted to tell for the prequels, 75% of it is in this film. The other 25% of it is in Attack of the Clones, and basically Phantom Menace was all filler. Now, it's a bit bizarre considering Phantom Menace actually, now on reflection, feels like it's the better film. Although I can see that there are more important story elements in Attack of the Clones with regards to Anakin's turn. Even without that interview, you look at this film and you can tell, okay, this has got a lot more going on in it than the first two put together. It's definitely where most of the story is at. There's a bit too much going on in there. We've got a whole swathe of villains to get through on the journey to get into Anakin turning to the dark side. But no, I think it's some really great action. It's great to have Palpatine really coming to the fore. He was always my favourite villain in Star Wars way back when. I was always more of an Emperor man than a Darth Vader guy. The Emperor was always more intriguing to me, to be honest. But no, I like the journey, and I like the crushing blow. Despite the stupid dialogue that we still get from George Lucas, you can't win, Anakin. I have the high ground. Despite the fact that in Phantom Menace we saw Darth Maul had the high ground, and yeah, Obi-Wan managed to take him out. So nonsense dialogue like that, it still does hit you with quite an emotional punch when he says, "We were brothers, Anakin. I loved you," and it's just like it is a real gut punch. And the moment with Anakin kind of sliding down the hill and bursting into flame, it's really well handled, and it could just be because Hayden Christensen looks burnt to a crisp, but like his performance even seems better in that moment. Maybe the crispy stuff has just helped. But when he says that he hates Obi-Wan, it's like, "I hate you." That's the one time his kind of whiny aesthetic kind of suits has worked within the framework of the role. But yeah, it's some really great stuff. Again, there's a lot of minor things in there that just the romance never really worked for me. But yeah, younglings. He killed younglings. There's as much to laugh at as there is to celebrate. But it's still a really solid, entertaining Star Wars film with some. The highs in it are some of the best highs in the entire franchise. Number 22 is Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore. I think this film, from what I can tell, it's bombed at the box office, which is a real shame. I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as people are making out. Once again, I think it had a lot going against it with regards to behind-the-scenes antics, fallings out, various actors being taken off due to court cases, other actors being kind of slowly written down due to their shenanigans. There's a lot of drama with this film behind the scenes. It's a wonder it ever came to see the light of day at all, to be quite honest. But as it stands, it's a pretty solid story about Dumbledore and his relationship with Grindelwald. It's not a flawless film by any stretch. It's definitely got some issues. Certain characters feel underwritten. Characters that I loved from the first two just seem to disappear altogether, only to crop up and have a tiny moment at the end. Again, can't help but feel that that's due to some drama behind the scenes. So yeah, messy, I would say. It's a messy narrative that feels like it's trying to clean various things up, but it still works. It's still a dramatic movie with a pretty decent character arc for Newt and Dumbledore and the team. It's an enjoyable adventure. Number 21 is Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. As a kid, probably my favourite. Not so much these days. Obviously, you can tell from the position on this list, but I still have a lot of fun with it. I think the first section of the film, all the Jabba the Hutt stuff, goes on much longer than I remember it being as a kid. It actually drags for me a bit. I think the ending of the film I'm of two minds about this. One, I don't like the Ewoks. Okay, you can throw all the arguments at me that you want. I just don't like them. It's just my personal taste. They're annoying. I find them annoying. I find the stretches of the film in which C-3PO is held up as a god by them. It bores me. I get really bored by it. However, I do understand and accept that the film is about a rebellion, and how rebellions against tyranny can start with or be achieved with the smallest of creatures and the most non-threatening looking of creatures, and that's where the Ewoks fit in, I guess, to that idea. So I think there's room there to have that element. I just think that once they're in, they're just, there's too much of them. There's a few other things, like when we start the film, as I say, when we have all the Jabba the Hutt stuff, and Luke kind of comes into it all, and it's almost like he's a fully fledged Jedi. It's like he's had his training. See, this is what I'm assuming. Okay, when I first watched the film, not by the time I've finished watching it, but when I'm watching the film and Luke pops up, I'm like, he's been away. He's fulfilled his promise to go back to Dagobah and fulfill his training with Yoda, and now he's back. He's a fully fledged Jedi, and he's going to sort Jabba the Hutt out because he's done his training. No, he's not even done his training. He does all this stuff as this like proper awesome Jedi, and then he goes back to Yoda and says, I've come to fulfill my training. And Yoda basically says, yeah, you're pretty much done. You're good. Right? Okay. So you fought Darth Vader once and lost, and now you're like super Jedi. Beyond that, there's some really great stuff in this. The special effects hold up really well. I love all the stuff between Han and Leia. Again, the stuff on the Death Star at the end with the climax between those three characters. I love everything with Lando Calrissian. There's a lot of stuff in there that's really good, fun adventure stuff. It's just there's awful lot in there as well that drags it down, that leaves me scratching my head as to why this franchise became the monolithic, untouchable, group of films to end all films kind of franchise for a lot of people. Number 20 is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. It's got a great setup, a really good adventure story. It's got an excellent conclusion that goes really dark, really gritty. So bookended with really great stuff. It's just in the middle section, it turns into this kind of high school movie in which it's almost like we're dealing with puberty and people fancying each other and just stuff that's like it just stops the film dead in its tracks for a while, for a good chunk. I like the stuff in there that I find amusing. If they took it out and had it as a short film, as a special film, I'd be like, oh, this is charming, isn't it? It's really nice. But when it comes in the middle of a film that has been really dramatic, has been going somewhere, and then it kind of just stops to have all this stuff and then get back to it, for me, that's why it's the weakest Harry Potter film. That being said, I still really like it. I like all the Harry Potter movies. I've just reviewed them recently, all of them on my channel. When this is your worst film in your franchise, then you're doing something right. Number 19 is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. This film is super faithful, to the novel. Chris Columbus, in retrospect, he was the right director to kick things off, because I think he's an actor's director. When you're dealing with young kids, if you look at a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, he was a director who clearly knew how to handle kids, how to talk to kids and how to relate to them and get the best out of them from that way. I don't think from a visual standpoint he's the best director in the world. He was the right guy to bring these kids into these roles and lead them through, and then obviously let Alfonso Cuarón take over. Number 18 is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, which in so many ways just feels like a retread of the first film. It has a very similar structure. I just feel like it does everything the first one did, but it does it slightly better. And I think a lot of that as well is that we've got past the setup. Philosopher's Stone does the setup. It's like if you look at the first three films, the time that we spend with the Dursleys gets shorter and shorter across each of them. And again, like I say, it's because we've done the setup. We know who these characters are now, so we can just have fun with it. And number 17 is Star Wars: The Last Jedi. I think this film is super underrated. I watched it recently, and all the stuff about it being woke, I really don't see. Star Wars fans shot themselves in the foot when they went for the jugular with this film, rather than letting the story play out, see where it was going to go. Because we've got to remember this was a middle section. It really annoyed me, the way fans just they think they can do a better job. That's the thing. If you can do a better job, get off your ass and go make films. No, I thought the direction they took this in was great. I love the biblical undertones of it. You know, Luke's mindset, his outlook for this is, if you think of a biblical sense of the Israelites being God's chosen people, and they get a little bit high and mighty because of that, and they forget that actually God is for everyone. They're meant to take that out to the world. It's a good analogy to draw with the Jedi, and I feel like that's the realization Luke has come to. It's not the Jedi who are special because the Force has chosen them. It's the Force that is special, that makes the Jedi what they are. And it's just, I feel like that's the thing that the film is dealing with. Right down to the final shot of the movie when some nobody kid out in the sticks somewhere is, he picks up his broom almost like a lightsaber, and you get the sense that, the Force lives within this kid and many more like him. It is open to everyone in the same way that the Holy Spirit is open to everyone, not just the select few. And then you have this adventure in which Rose and Finn go to this planet, which is literally, it's all about class. It's all about the small few that are at the top, that hoard everything, that have all the wealth and power, and then you've got all these kids, all these poor people working for them, doing all the hard labour and stuff. That's directly in keeping with the themes that are being set up with Luke and Rey. Number 16 is Star Wars: The Force Awakens. A little bit like with my analogy between Harry Potter's 1 and 2. Yes, this is a remake of A New Hope in many respects. It does the same thing. It has a lot of the same story beats. It just does them better because you've got a director who knows how to get emotion from things. I mean, I've said this till I'm blue in the face. The emotional beats in this hit a lot harder than anything in A New Hope for me. I prefer Kylo Ren as a character over Darth Vader. I don't think Darth Vader actually becomes a character until we get the bombshell that he drops at the end of Empire. Until then, he's just literally someone who wants to rule the galaxy. Whereas with Kylo Ren, we have a very conflicted character right from the get-go. Where that conflict is going to take him across the course of this film and the next two is what I find intriguing. Certainly was when I first watched this. Now, this was my favourite Star Wars film at one point. I've watched it many times over the intervening years, and it has lowered somewhat. But I think that often comes with watching a film quite a few times. The Death Star stuff, like it's yes, we're repeating the Death Star but bigger. It's not so much that they redo the Death Star thing that bugs me. It's more the size of it, the scope of it. I'm just like, blimey, that's some serious resources there to be able to put that together. The suspension of disbelief is just, it's too big. At number 15, and this one really surprised me as much as anybody. It's Rise of Skywalker. I know that people, so many fingers right now are hovering over the unsubscribe button, or have literally just turned the video off right now. Look, I'm not the Star Wars guy. I've never been religious about this franchise. So for me, I've enjoyed the sequel trilogy far more than, on the whole, the stuff that came before. I don't think this film is anywhere near as bad as people say. There's a lot of things in this film where it feels like they've done a bit of a dovetail in order to counteract the backlash to Last Jedi. But watching it this time around, it was the first time I'd watched all the Star Wars movies in order, chronological order. This time around, Rise of Skywalker fit in really well. Much better than I remembered. There's not really anything of great importance that it feels like they've left out from the previous two or covered over. I still feel like it carries over that theme somewhat of, the Force being open for everyone. We get that within characters such as Finn and the woman he meets on this other planet, and the fact that they're doing things because they are now believing in the Force. Is Rey a Mary Sue? I don't think so, personally. She gets her ass handed to her in this film by Kylo Ren. They have their final battle, so to speak, and he gets the upper hand. He's got her. And if not for his mum trying to get in touch, trying to reach him that one final time, that's it. Rey's done with. So no, I don't think she is a Mary Sue. It's only by the fact that her and Kylo Ren team up together that they are able to defeat the Emperor. So it's just, I feel like it's a film about people needing people, not being able to do it alone, and looking to, you know, the Force, the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it, to help you get there. At number 14 is Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, a film that I spent 5 days working on, and you don't see me like at all, except for one little out of focus shot. But that aside, I actually really like this film. I think it's easily the best of the 3 Fantastic Beasts movies we've had. I think the world that it sets up, while it is the same world, obviously, that Harry Potter exists in, it is the American side of things. So this is what the wizarding world looks like in America. And I enjoy it. I really like it. I like having a look at how things operate within this world on the other side of the ocean. I like the characters, the 4 main characters that we get, particularly the central character, Newt Scamander. I think is a really great character. Eddie Redmayne does a fantastic job. If I'm being perfectly honest, I wish they'd have kept Colin Farrell as Grindelwald, because I like Farrell as an actor anyway. I think he's getting a bit more clout these days, but I've always really found him to be a particularly enjoyable actor to watch. It has some slow plodding parts in it, but it's all kind of character driven. It's all about getting these guys together and building their relationship, so it takes its time in much the same way as the first Harry Potter film does. Now, I don't think this is in the same league as the Harry Potter movies, certainly not the best Harry Potter movies anyway, but as a kickstarter to kind of a new franchise, but sort of the same franchise, which is a bit of a weird thing. I think it's really, really solid stuff. Number 13 is The Hobbit, Battle of the Five Armies. This film puts an awful lot into it that wasn't in the book. It feels like it's really stretching that one book out. But you know what? At the end of the day, I'm just so happy to be back in Middle-earth, I kind of just let it slide. The writing quality isn't up there with Tolkien because most of it is Jackson, and that shows. It's very action heavy, but I feel like the emotional payoffs don't hit you quite as hard as, say, what they did with Lord of the Rings. But it's Middle-earth, you know? It's Middle-earth. If you're a fan of Lord of the Rings and you wanted to go back there, we get these films, and it's like, yeah, you know what? I'm glad to be back here. Number 12 on this 31 on 31 is The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. This is the one that kicks the Hobbit trilogy off. Again, the stuff that's faithful to the book, I really love. The stuff that is more Jackson, kind of just beefing it up a bit, I'm not as enamored with. It doesn't offend me or anything. It's an enjoyable ride, but I do feel like this could be all 3 of them should have been 2-hour movies, to be honest. If you have to do a trilogy, make the film smaller. A lot of the special effects in this are there's an over-reliance, I would say, on CGI. It takes any true element of danger out of things. They can do whatever they want and just make it a special effect and have a bridge fall neatly into this place despite having this massive drop and nobody gets hurt. That's probably my biggest gripe with the Hobbit trilogy in general, is because of the over-reliance on CGI and because there's just so much of it. There are times where you get the sense that these characters are never truly in danger. It's still enjoyable though. The scene with Gollum is probably the standout scene for me. Having Gollum back, having Andy Serkis do what he does with that character, such a tragic character, one of the best characters in literature and in movies, to be honest, just because of how tragic he is. Seeing his interactions and the riddles in the dark sequence play out, I really loved that moment. Number 11 is The Hobbit, Desolation of Smaug. It's bizarre. Reading it as a kid, I always read it as Smog, so I could never get on board with this Smaug. But yeah, Desolation of Smaug. Again, biggest gripe with this one is the element I talked about, which is the reliance on CGI so much that it kind of takes a lot of the danger out. So the barrel sequence and a lot of the stuff with Smaug breathing fire, and they just happen to run around a corner just before the fire goes, and then they run around another corner just before. It's like this. There's massive dragon, and the amount of fire that he's able to pour out, and they're able to just quickly dip out of the way here, there, and everywhere all the time. It's just sometimes it really does stretch believability. Beyond that, I really love it. Benedict Cumberbatch as Smaug is great. His voice acting for that is just it's perfectly cast. Perfect pitch for that character. It's a great dragon, great design. Who knew? After a few watches, this became my favourite of the trilogy, whereas first time round, not so much. Number 10 is The Empire Strikes Back. It's close to perfect, I'll say. Again, I've never been quite as emotionally invested in this world and in these characters as most people, as I've said. So it's just... I don't feel like I want to rush back. You know, like I can look at a film like Chinatown and I can say, yes, it's a perfect... I've used this analogy before, but I look at it and I think it's a perfect script. I can't fault it, you know. If I can't fault it, then it's a perfect script. But I've only ever seen Chinatown once and I've got no urge to rush back and watch it. And Empire Strikes Back is kind of like that. When I'm watching it, as I did this time around, I can look at it and I'm like, yeah, that's a great film. I just don't ever find myself rushing to watch Empire Strikes Back. But I do accept how great it is as a movie, and I can understand why people hold this one as high as they do. But as it turns out, my favourite Star Wars movie is Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. This is one that's keeps going up in my esteem. It must be said. First time I saw it, I was like, yeah, it's very good, but it's just, I feel like people are maybe going a bit overboard with the praise for it. And then the second time I watched it, I was like, you know, actually, this is much better than I gave it credit for. I'm more engrossed in the characters. I was more into each of their journeys. And then I finally watched it for a third time, which was for this 31 and 31. And I was just like, yeah, this is damn good. This is a real damn good film. For me, it's the best Star Wars film. I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that all the characters in it are expendable. There's no stupid love interest. They're heading towards a path that is, well, it's destruction. It is a film about sacrifice. It's a film about why people choose to make sacrifices. You've got one who's doing it purely because they are good. They are inherently good. They are one with the Force, you know, and the Force is one with them. You've got a character who's doing it essentially for revenge and to find her father. And then you've got this other character who's doing it to wash away his sins. He's doing it to atone for his past. So it's a really great study on sacrifice. Number 8 is Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. It's a film that's grown on me more over the years. I felt like there was certain elements about it that didn't really hit me first time around. I was kind of like, that was a bit flat. But the more I watched it and the more I pay attention to it, particularly this time around when I reviewed it, there was a lot more in there that I caught hold of that kind of grabbed me, and I was like, yeah, I got more emotionally invested. I love all the stuff with Malfoy and his struggles with going to the dark side. You can tell he doesn't want to. You can tell he's kind of being dragged that way against his will, and he's floundering in it. Number 7 is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, brilliantly directed by Alfonso Cuarón. My only real gripe, again, you know, check out my review if you want to know my more in-depth thoughts, but it's just, it feels like a film with two endings. We get to a climax and then it kind of winds things back and then we go through it all again. I don't want to say it makes it drag at the end, but it does feel like, oh, we were getting there, and then all of a sudden we do the whole time travel thing, and it's like we're back to square one and we're going back through it again. Story-wise, it works. You know, you kind of need it in order to to get certain elements that we get. Beyond that, it's a really great Harry Potter movie. It's a really great movie. Number 6 is Deathly Hallows Part 1. A lot of people don't warm to this one as far as Harry Potter movies go, because they say, oh, it's all set up, no payoff. Like it's just Harry and Hermione walking through the woods, and I don't think it is, personally. I think it's doing quite a lot with regards to leading us into the next one, but in an emotional way. You know, there's yes, it's a lot more sedate, a lot more subdued, but there's some real deep character stuff going on between our core group of heroes, Harry, Ron and Hermione. You know, their relationship is really being put to the test. The story that we get about the Deathly Hallows, I love it. It's just, I love that lore, you know, and the fact that it's told in this animated style as well is just, again, really creative and visually interesting. There's some real good funny moments, some good humour when they break into the Ministry of Magic. It's like neck and neck with Part 2, which is, of course, my number 5. Deathly Hallows Part 2, number 5 for me. Yeah, what a great payoff. There's not a right lot this film does wrong. There's a couple of instances where characters get taken out without us seeing it, which is a bit, well, it's very anticlimactic given the journey that we've gone on over these 8 movies. I'd have liked to have seen them get taken out if they're going to get taken out, rather than just, hey, look, they're dead. But beyond that, so many great payoffs. Absolutely incredible conclusion to what has been a brilliant, engaging story with a world that I'm sorry to no longer be in. But for me, the best Harry Potter film is at number 4 in this list, and it is Order of the Phoenix. It is the film that adapted the biggest book and turned it into the shortest movie. And a lot of fans didn't like it. When I look at a lot of lists, it does tend to be right at the bottom of those lists. And I think that comes from a lot of the fans who prefer their movie adaptations to be rigidly faithful to the book they've read. As I've already stated in this video, I'm not that guy. I think what this film does is it understands what it needs to take away from the book to make a movie that works. It takes the essentials and it makes a very clear-cut narrative. There's not a wasted moment. Everything in this film is there because it needs to be there. The characters are all great. We get one of the best villains with Dolores Umbridge. We get, easily for my money, the best climax of any of the movies, with the fight between Dumbledore and Voldemort, and Harry dropping the line about how he feels sorry for him because he'll never know love. It's just, that always hits me in the feels. It's just, yeah, it's a brilliant film. It's a great film. It's the film that truly made me a Harry Potter fan. But as you can guess by now, because they've not popped up on the list and we've only got 3 movies left, Lord of the Rings is my number 1, 2 and 3 choice. Now, I've always counted this as just one long movie that's just been broken into 3. So I hate the idea of putting them in an order. But for the sake of this video, you know, that's what we've got to do. So if I had to, here is how I would put them. I would put Two Towers at number 3. I would put Return of the King at number 2. And I would put Fellowship of the Ring at number 1. Yeah, I think Fellowship has much more variety of tone, I think, in an organic way, not in a like, ooh, the tone's all over the place, but like, no, because they go to various different places, it just allows for a lot of breathing space to go to different places and change the tone, change the look. So I feel like I'm on more of a wider breadth of adventure, I guess. Whereas you get to Two Towers, it's just all dark. You know, it's all Helm's Deep. It's just like, it gets really dark and rainy. It feels like one tone throughout. You got all the tree bird stuff going on as well, and a lot of that takes place at night, so the colour palette doesn't change that much. And then you got Return of the King, that it's all, there's not as much travelling going on in Return of the King. You're either here or you're there, depending on whose story you're following. It may seem like a daft argument as to how I place them, but like I say, I do count this as just one long film. But Fellowship of the Ring, I just, purely from my memories of it, seeing it for the first time in the cinema, I'd read the book, I was a fan of the book. I didn't think a film was truly going to get to grips with the book, but you know, we knew they were already filming them back to back, so you must have some faith in it. And then you get there, you watch it, and you're like, this is the book. This is the book, right? This, you know, how I feel watching this movie, seeing the world of Middle-earth. This is how I envisioned it in my head. When I'm reading the book, this is what I'm seeing. Jackson nailed it big time. There you go. That is my 31 on 31 fantasy edition. Don't forget to check out Cody Leach's and Sean Chandler's, and hopefully we'll get something from CP at some point. Let me know politely, please, down in the comment section what you think of my choices. Let me know what your choices would be. And if you haven't done so already, although traditionally mine is the first video out, so you wouldn't have been able to do so by now if we follow suit. But yeah, in about an hour or whenever it's going to be, check out Cody's and then check out Sean's videos. So thanks for watching. Leave your comments below, and until next time, cracking.